Hi Violists, my name is Dr. Nathan Groot. I am a music teacher at the Arkansas School for Mathematics, Sciences, and the Arts, and today I want to go over a piece called Loch Lomond with you that is included in the audition list for all region and all state for the junior high division. Before we get into talking through the piece, I'm just going to play it through. So, there's a lot going on in this piece. First, let's draw our attention to the first information we have, the key signature and the time signature. The key signature has one flat, so we know that it's either F major or D minor. In this case, looking at the first note of the first full measure and the last note, I'm going to guess it's F major. So, let's look at our time signature. Remember that the bottom number tells us what we're counting and the top number tells us how many there are. We have 4, 4, which means that there are 4 quarter notes in each measure. This first measure is what's called an anacrusis, or I shouldn't even say measure. This first 2 eighth notes, the C and the D, it's not a full measure. It's leading into that downbeat. So when you're counting this off to yourself, you can say 1, 2, 3, da da da, like that, okay? So that's actually beat 4 and it's leading in. That's also why it's an up bow, okay? That's why bowings are important. Also important is that we have been given a metronome marking. Quarter note equals 80. This is going to be important because a lot of pieces, like Jenny with the light brown hair, didn't have a metronome marking. So when you're given a metronome marking, you want to try to be as faithful as you can to that. It's possible in an audition setting that maybe you'll go a little faster. Try to hold yourself back from that. Try to stay faithful to what's written on the page as much as you can. So let's talk about the overall structure of this piece. We have lots of short phrases that are broken up by what are called Caesura. Those are those 2 lines that you see. A Caesura means that you can stop. It's marking the end of a phrase, and it means that you can have a brief pause before you begin the next one. We have a lot of these in this piece. Another thing we have a lot of are fermatas. A fermata means that you can lengthen the rhythmic value of a note. It's kind of up to the performer, but generally we don't want to hold it super, super long, maybe about double the length-ish of what the original notated value is. Let's talk about how the composer messes with the tempo and pulse a little bit. So we have at the end retardando in measure 14. A retardando means that we're slowing down. And then on beat 4, we have a tempo, which means we're back in the original tempo. We're at quarter note equals 80. And then almost immediately again for the end, we slow down again. These frequent pauses are also messing with our sense of pulse in some way. But when you're playing this, try to get back to that original pulse as much as you can. So after a Caesura, when it says a tempo, try to find that pulse again. So let's talk about one of the most common rhythmic pitfalls. I do it, everyone does it, we all sort of have to try to keep ourselves from doing it. It's turning a dotted 8th note and a 16th note into a triplet. So a triplet sounds like this: 1, 2, 3, 4. ta, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, triple lit, triple lit. 16th notes sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Here we have a dotted eighth, which is the equivalent of 3/16, and then the 4th 16th in that group. So what often happens is we end up with this. Da 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 da, da da da. We end up with that dotted 8th and 16th relationship being turned into triplets. That's something that whoever is listening to this audition is going to really be listening for, I promise. So, how do we fix that? A good way to do that is to practice subdividing it. Da, 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 da. You can even practice subdividing everything into 16th notes if you want, so. Practice doing that so that you can, then when you're playing it, you can hear those subdivisions in your head. So that way, you're less likely to play this, basically. Triplet subdivision. Another thing that might be tricky for you is that we have a lot of these dotted 8th, 16th, followed by just 8th notes. And it might be really tempting to play the 8th notes as a dotted 8th, 16th, or vice versa. So it might be easy to switch those around. Just be really mindful as you're practicing this to make a real distinction between those two. Don't let them sort of meld into each other. Make a real distinction between da, ta, ta, and ta, ta, right? So a really good example of that is if I start pick up to measure 9, so we have these dotted rhythms, and then we have the just straight 8th notes after that. It would be tempting, maybe, for some to just play all of those as dotted. One other note about fermatas. That pickup to measure 9 has a fermata over it. We're used to seeing fermatas like in measure 6 as the end of a phrase. That sort of makes logical sense to us. But in this case, the pickup to the new phrase actually has a fermata over it. So we go, we lengthen that pickup, da, 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 then we go. So that can be a little bit tricky. It might be one that's easy to ignore because it's not quite where we expect it to be. So last thing, let's talk a little bit about the difference between a slur and a hook. So you'll notice that some of these are just, so for the first notes we play, for example, are just slurred. That means the bow just moves like this. It doesn't care that our left hand is moving. It doesn't care that it's 8th notes. It might as well be a quarter note as far as our bow is concerned. So let's look at measure 9. We have these staccato marks actually under the slur over those note heads. So that means that we can no longer just let our bow play quarter notes, that the bow has to be involved in that rhythm. I would encourage you to practice this slowly and actually practice it with your scale. So let's say you were playing an F major scale. You can also do 8th notes. It involves just stopping the bow and restarting it. Try playing this stuff slowly, record yourself, see how it's sounding. One important thing about this is to not use too much bow when you're playing these hooked bowings. So, it's possible to use a lot of bow, but you're more likely to end up with kind of some sloppy sounds, and you want these staccatos to be really crisp as possible. All right, I hope that this was in some way helpful to you. If I skipped over anything important, or if you just have questions that you want answered before these auditions, let me know, shoot me a note. I'd be happy to help, and I'd love to hear from you. All right, best of luck and happy practicing.